Hi everyone, and welcome to this session on what's new in SAP HANA Cloud in Q2 2022. In this session, the SAP HANA product management team will introduce and demonstrate the most recent added innovations to SAP HANA Cloud. This includes real-time performance analysis for long-running SQL statements, additional self-services for your migration to SAP HANA Cloud, near-zero downtime upgrades for the SAP HANA Cloud Data Lake, enhancements and new features in the SAP HANA Database Explorer, and many, many more. So now, without any further words from my side, I want to hand it over to Thomas, who will guide you through the rest of this session.
Thanks a lot, Susan. Thanks for these very kind words and these words of introduction. And as usual, I'm very happy to share some insights into our latest innovations that we have introduced into HANA Cloud now with our Q2 release of SAP HANA Cloud in 2022. As usual, we have a bunch of innovations with us that we will dive into. But before we take a look at the detailed content, I want to definitely emphasize that this is not the only content of the release that has been introduced. There is definitely more. And in the resources later on, you can also find more information about what's part of the entire scope of our Q2 release of SAP HANA Cloud. Now, as usual, of course, it's not just me here in the call giving you insights into the specific innovations that we have introduced. Rather, I have brought a big group of product managers and product experts with me that will guide us through the individual innovations and will give us a precise insight into the innovations and what you should expect now from the Q2 release of SAP HANA Cloud. So definitely you can look forward to many demonstrations, many first-hand information that will be transported by our product experts. Now let's take a quick look at the topics that we will cover during this session today. As usual, we will definitely focus on the two main service components of SAP HANA Cloud. So we will talk about the SAP HANA database and innovations that have been introduced specifically for this service, but we will also talk about the data lake and innovations that we have introduced here. And then we will also take a closer look at the tooling that we're providing for SAP HANA, especially the Database Explorer, as well as the Database Explorer plugin for the Visual Studio Code. And later on, I will wrap it up with a general update, give you a few more insights into most recent changes related to SAP HANA Cloud and things you should definitely be aware of. And then we'll wrap it up to give you, let's say, a packaged overview of what's new in HANA Cloud. And now, without a lot of further ado, as we have a packed agenda and many topics to share, as you can see on the screen, I will directly hand it over to our first product expert, giving us a tour about the migration self-service. In this case, it's Tanuja, who will share an update with us what's new in the area of migration. Tanuja, stage is yours.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Thomas, and a warm welcome from my end. So today I'm going to talk about the HANA Cloud migration, and I will introduce with the key capabilities. So without any ado, let's jump into it. So before starting the migration, you should get familiar with the features and capabilities of SAP HANA Cloud. So there are many reasons as a customer to adopt SAP HANA Cloud, including flexibility to optimize cost, a built-in data lake, and multi-model processing to enable new platforms and more. So since 2020, we are focusing on the HANA Cloud as the target or all this database migration because HANA Cloud is the next generation of HANA on the cloud. So now the thing is, when it comes to HANA Cloud migration, the automation or migration tool has been the one area of focus. So as you can see here, on the right side, there is a HANA Cloud, and on the left side, there are HANA services. So there are three platforms for HANA Cloud migration automation tool. So the first platform is from migrating HANA as a service database on Cloud Foundry to HANA Cloud. Second platform is HANA as a service on Neo to HANA Cloud. And the last one is HANA Cloud 2.0 to HANA Cloud. So we'll talk about each platform one by one. So for the first platform, that is migrating HANA as a service database on Cloud Foundry to HANA Cloud. So for this platform, we already released a migration tool that is publicly available and customers can use it for automatic in the whole migration process. And moreover, continuous innovation will be released in the future. So the other one is HANA service for Cloud Foundry to HANA Cloud migration on Alibaba Cloud. Basically, migration tool is getting enabled on data center to data center. So Ali Cloud recently started supporting HANA Cloud. So we released HANA service to HANA Cloud migration tool on Ali Cloud. So the key capabilities for the Ali Cloud is same as the Cloud Foundry, and that is pre-migration checker, catalog object, and the data migration. So yeah, we'll talk about each of them shortly. So whereas the second platform, that is HANA as a service on Neo to HANA Cloud. So the Neo release for the Q2 2022 is the first release of migration self-service, which includes pre-checker, catalog object, and data migration. So yeah, let's talk about these three capabilities which are already released as a part of the initial version. So the first one, that is the pre-migration checker. So pre-migration checker makes migration to SAP HANA Cloud easier. Now every migration has a source that you migrate from and a target that you migrate to. So for this pre-migration checker, the source is SAP HANA service and the target is SAP HANA Cloud. So yeah, let's remind what these are. SAP HANA service is the previous generation of hosted HANA database from SAP, and it is built on the HANA 2.0 code line and is offered both in SAP data centers and also called the Neo platform and on hyperscaler data centers using Cloud Foundry. So SAP HANA Cloud is built with cloud in mind and has a much more extensive set of integrations and backing services and is the platform for innovation. So once you have prepared both your SAP HANA service database and your SAP HANA Cloud database instances for the migration, you can use the pre-migration checker to migrate things like catalog objects, database schema, and data stored in the database. So the pre-migration checker generates a report that lists everything that will migrate. So some features can be automatically migrated by the checker tool, and the features that cannot be like automatically migrated, the checker tool includes information about the feature and the offer suggestions about how to adapt your current implementation to work in SAP HANA Cloud wherever possible. And the second key capability is catalog object. So it is basically about to migrate the database catalog from source HANA to the target HANA Cloud database. So the catalog means anything that construct our metadata. So that's regarding what database objects are defined by customers and how these objects are defined within database. Then we'll move to the last key capability, that is data migration. So this is actually much more simple. So like it means we are trying to provide an automatic way to migrate the data rows inside the tables to the HANA Cloud database. So yeah, that's all about the key capabilities. So moving forward to the last platform, that is SAP HANA 2.0. So SAP HANA 2.0 is planned and it will be the first release. So yeah, we are looking forward to it. And besides that, we do have a global HANA Cloud migration program to help the customers with adoption. So the program objectives are to simplify adoption of SAP HANA Cloud for customers running like SAP HANA service for Cloud Foundry Neo or on-premise SAP HANA or any non-SAP apps databases. So yeah, we are providing a concierge migration service via the so-called database migration factory, which you can find more information about in the resources. Moreover, we also have the help desk for HANA Cloud migration. So yeah, and with that, I would like to stop and hand over to the next speaker, which is Taisuk, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. Hi, my name is Tesok Son, and I'm also one of the member of the HANA product management team. And today I would like to introduce you to the real-time performance analysis of long-running SQL statements. So with the QRCO2, we just released this SQL plan execution monitor. So what it is doing is with the inside the SAP HANA database while the SQL statement is being processed internally. We can enable the monitoring of this execution and monitor it in real time using the sort of like a plan graph. But compared to the existing plan viz or plan trace, which you can enable to create plan viz files based on certain criteria, this has a little bit of a minimal system overhead compared to the existing plan viz or plan trace. Also, you have to know the exact statement to create while using plan viz, because you are asking to generate a plan viz based on a certain statement, or you're trying to use the plan trace based on criteria, but it is taking a lot of system resources because it's actually trying to generate a large plan viz in the background. But the benefit of using the SQL Plan Execution Monitor is that it does not go into that detail of the physical execution plan, but it is using a more of the logical plan and showing how the SQL statements are being processed at a more logical operational level. And this can be connected to a live HANA system, and you're looking at it live while the statement is being processed. And also the result data set is kept for 24 hours. And so if you missed a certain performance issue, you can always go to the system, connect to it, and look at the execution of each of the statement and how it was processed as long as you're accessing within 24 hours. So if you look at the graph here, I have it a little bit animated. It's showing that the logical plan of a certain SQL statement, and you would have noticed that the blue part of the operators were becoming blue from the bottom all the way to the top. So you're actually looking at the SQL statement, the plan operator level, where when and how long the operator took, and actively monitor them in real time. So to do this, we allow this monitoring using the SQL analyzer within the Visual Studio Code, and within the Visual Studio Code, we will be using the HANADB connection, and we connect to either an on-prem HANA system or a SAP HANA Cloud and make that connection. So here I have an on-prem system, but in the demo, I will show you with the HANA Cloud. And once connected, I can right-click on the system and open SQL Plan Execution Monitor and enable the monitor, put the filtering criteria so I can filter based on a certain application user or a certain application name, or filter by database, and also how long the statement took. So instead of trying to save all the data all the execution that was executed in the database, limit to some long running statements. And based on this filtering, it will show the statement is being executed inside the application. And this blue part is visualize, where you can visualize and connect to the system and look at the SQL execution live. As this is the first release of the SQL Plan Execution Monitor, we currently are supporting the legacy engines as of now, but we will gradually support the HEX engine in the future release. Also, scale out is not supported for on-prem, but we will try to support scale out in the coming release of SPS 07. As I mentioned, this is part of the SQL Analyzer within the Visual Studio Code. So using the Visual Studio Code to connect to SAP HANA Cloud or the on-prem HANA is required. Also, the data is kept for 24 hours, and within the 2 GB, but this is configurable where you can change the configuration to increase the storage limitations. And like I've mentioned, the visualization is based on the logical execution plan and not the physical execution plan, because we wanted to have minimal system resource a burden into the source system. So we're using a more logical execution plan to monitor the SQL execution. And also, as I've shown in the previous slide, we will be using the HANA DB connection as the Database Explorer plugin for the Visual Studio Code was just released in this quarter. That we were supporting the existing connections for the SQL Analyzer, but we are planning to migrate it to the Database Explorer as well. So based on that, let me show a quick demo. So here, I'm using the SQL Studio, Visual Studio Code, and I'm trying to connect to my HANA Cloud trial instance. So I'm using the port to connect instead of the instance number, using the 443, connecting using the DB admin. And I'm validating the connection first, and then once I've validated, I'm saving it, and then I'm storing the DB admin credentials. And as you can see, the system is listed. And once it makes the connection, the Open SQL Plan execution, SQL Plan monitor becomes active. And I right-click on that, where the SQL Plan execution monitor becomes available. And I can turn it on or off. To enable or disable the SQL Plan execution monitor, and I'll use the filtering. And for this demo, I'll put the retention time for 2 seconds. So even for a short running query, that it will try to keep the information in the monitoring view. And I'll write a simple query to look at from my SQL Plan cache. So I put a limit 1,000 records. And I select the statement and execute the query from here. And once it reaches the 2-second limit that I put the criteria in, it will be popped up in this list because it fits the selection criteria. And as you can see, the status is running, and I will just visualize the statement that is currently being executed. So this is the logical plan of the statement that was running. So there's 2 data reads, and then it's materialized union and the 1,000 limit and projection of the data. And as you can see here, the light cyan color was the open time, and the yellow is the time of the fetch. So as you can see, most of the processing is being done on the left side node for the reading of the data, and the data was projected. And this execution, as you can see, is now in the finished state. And you can see the open time, the fetch time, and the close time. So the details is not as detailed as the physical execution plan or the PLV that you normally see, but it gives the enough information of each of the nodes, operator nodes, where the bottleneck is. So even for a complex SQL statement, you can easily notice where the bottleneck is, like is it a join or is it a filtering? And you can use this information to figure out what is happening within your system without going back and trying to recreate the issue once it has been completed. So that's it for my section, and then I'll hand it back to Thomas.
Thank you, Tisuk, and thanks for giving us insights into the enhancements that we now have in the real-time performance analysis. I think that's a really great functionality and will provide definitely a lot of enhancements for customers and ease the usage. Now, the next topic that we want to talk about is about calculation view modeling, specifically about the chances that we now have to speed up calculation views and the processing behind using so-called snapshots. And Jan Zwickel, our product management expert on the topic of calculation views, will deep dive into this specific topic with us. So I'll basically hand it over directly to you, Jan, so that you can give us a tour on these latest new functionalities.
Thanks, Thomas. I will talk about the snapshot feature in calculation views, and I will only share one single slide with you and then show a demo in the system how it looks like. The idea of the snapshot feature is that you can define queries for a calculation view, and when you deploy this calculation view, then the result of this query is stored in a snapshot table. What you get from this feature is that some procedures are generated that help you then to manage these snapshot data. So you get a procedure for inserting, a procedure for creating the snapshot table, and so on. Then you can, for example, use a manual scheduler or a job scheduler to insert the data into your snapshots. And by that, you get a kind of lifecycle management for stored data of your query. If you use this feature, then you can use that to reduce the resource consumption and also speed up your queries if the data that you are requesting is not so time critical. So for example, you might think of putting a scheduler in for filling the snapshot table every morning if you know that this query is executed a lot of times during the day, but it does not change its results or it is not relevant to have the most up-to-date data as a result of the query. And then by putting it in every morning, you avoid having to process all the data again and again for every query that you're executing. Now, that was the theoretical part. Let's look into how it looks like in this system. So I have here a very simple calculation view, and you have now here under the view properties tab snapshots, and you can add here queries. You can add multiple queries if you want. So you can then rename your query name so that it makes sense to you what is written there. And you get here by default a default query that would be working on this calculation view. Now, let's say I have here. Let's first have a look at the data that's in that view. So you see here we have different countries in it: China, Germany, and US. Now, let's say I change this input parameter. Let's say I change it to Germany. Now, if I execute it, I only see the German data. Now, if I'm satisfied with the change of the query that I do, I can reduce columns and so on. Then I can deploy this view. And now at that time, the data that you see here will be persisted in a snapshot table. So let's just do a quick data preview on the view itself. So let's take the SQL statement. And if I execute it on the view, you see that I have all the countries in it. Now, let's look at the snapshot table that was created during the deployment. There is a naming convention for the snapshot table. So I can do a select star from, and now the name of the calculation view, CV snap. Then the query name, in my case, I just kept query 1, then snap, and for the snapshot table, snapshot. If I execute that now, you will see that now I have only the data in it that corresponds to my snapshot query. I can, for example, now also truncate this table. And let's say now I want to insert data of a different country, then I can use the insert procedure. So the naming convention is very similar. The only difference now is that I, at the end, had the insert for the insert procedure. And now I can also enter a different country. Let's say I'm interested in US, and then the US will be used to fill this input parameter here. So let's just do that. And if I now select from the snapshot table, you see now US is filled in. Another new option that we offer with that is that you can generate an interface view. So if I have deployed this calculation view and then I press on this rocket sign, then a new view is generated. And here we have made use of the technique of union pruning. So we have as one source the original calculation view, and as the other source the snapshot table. And based on an input parameter, we differentiate whether we go to one source or the other. So let's just deploy that. And if I do now a data preview, and I go to the, and just close the others. Better start here and do a data preview here again, not confusing the windows. And now if I go to the SQL, you see here I have the input parameter snapshot, which means now I'm querying from the snapshot. If I enter here base for the base view, then I see different data because that is what is in the calculation view itself. And that means also that it's a good way to toggle it or switch between the base view and the snapshot table. But you should also be clear that there can be differences in the results depending on how your query is defined. So if in my snapshot query I have, for example, a filter for a certain country, then there's a difference whether I switch between snapshot table and view or not. And with that, thanks for your attention, and I hand over to Thomas again. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan, for giving us insights into the new functionalities, specifically on the new enhancements that we have provided for snapshots and calculation views. And that basically already concludes our, let's say, quick highlight of innovations that we have introduced for the SAP HANA database as part of SAP HANA Cloud. Now, the next section, as you were seeing in the beginning of our presentation of our webinar, will basically be about the data lake. And here I have Robert with me in the call, who will give us some insights into a great new functionality that has been introduced for the data lake that, from my perspective, provides a very big benefit for our customers, especially from an operational perspective. So Robert, handing over to you for your deep dive.
Thanks, Thomas. Morning, folks. So for HANA Cloud Data Lake, the big new feature I want to talk about today is our support for near zero downtime upgrades. So near zero downtime upgrades take advantage of the fact that every data lake instance is a scale out instance with at least one coordinator, at least a coordinator node and at least one worker node. By default now, going forward, all upgrades to your data lake relational engine databases will be performed as a near zero downtime upgrade. You do have the option of turning off near zero downtime upgrades through the manage configuration page in HANA Cloud Central for that instance. But there's really no reason to do that in most circumstances, right? So when initiating a self-service upgrade going forward, you will be notified whether the upgrade will execute as a near zero downtime upgrade, again, the default behavior, or if an upgrade does require downtime, then the pop-up notification will confirm that state that this upgrade does require a restart, so that you're prepared for that and can choose to defer it till a later time that's better suited for your organization if needed. And that's it for the near zero downtime upgrades. Back to you, Thomas.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Robert. I think that in itself already shows the big value of the functionality, running the service with as little disruption as possible. not even disruptions that we're introducing with any updates to the service. So absolutely a great innovation, and definitely very important to highlight, and also very important to highlight that the new default behavior, which already introduces the benefits to the customers. Now, the next block of topics that we will talk about is specifically about the tooling that is very relevant for SAP HANA Cloud. In today's session, we will focus on the Database Explorer, as well as the Database Explorer plugin for the Visual Studio Code. So these two services are helping you to administrate your database artifacts, to work with the HANA database, but also the data lake in specific with both components. And for both of these, let's say, services or tools, we have introduced new functionalities. And here, again, we have two product managers or two product experts, say like that, with us that will guide us through the new features and the new enhancements. And first of all, Dan will give us an update on the innovations that we have introduced to the Database Explorer. And then we have Jonathan giving us an update on the Database Explorer plugin for the Visual Studio Code. Dan, first of all, over to you, and thanks for giving us a tour.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So my name is Dan Van Leeuwen, and I'll be demonstrating some of the recent new features in the SAP HANA Database Explorer. What I'd like to do is quickly go through a few slides outlining these, and then I'll jump to a quick demo. So the first new feature that I'd like to highlight is that within the SQL console, in the data viewer, in addition to support for HTML and JSON, XML, there's now support for spatial data. So you can visualize a geometry like a polygon, a line segment, or a point on a map. The second new feature is support for the import and export wizards. They now support using database credentials that have been stored into the database. So in this particular example, if I'm trying to import some data from an AWS bucket, I would need to have an access key and a secret key to enable access to that. I can now store those, or I could previously store those using the create credential statement. And now the wizard has an additional dropdown where you can specify, you can select the credential that you'd like to use for that. The third new feature is around JSON collections. So now the import and export wizard now support being able to import and export JSON to create a collection or to export a JSON collection. And the final new feature is for a data lake relational engine. So within the catalog browser, you now have a new database diagnostics files folder. And within that, you can see the different server logs and query plans for your data lake relational engine. So you can quickly find a particular file that you'd like to look at. You can open it up within the built-in viewer, or you can, of course, download the file and look at the file with a local viewer. So with that, I'm going to jump to a demonstration of these features. Okay, so here I've got a HANA Cloud connection, and I've got three different SQL statements that I'm going to use to demonstrate the ability to view spatial data. So the first select statement, I've got a polygon, and I've specified a spatial reference identifier. And I'm taking it from a well-known text or extended well-known text and creating an ST geometry field. And that's what's displayed here. If I wanted to visualize that, I can say view data. And the new viewer appears. You can notice that it's resizable. I can drag the map around. I can zoom out. I can zoom in. Right, so that makes it a lot easier to, if you just kind of want to visualize and see some data that you have within your database that's spatial, you can quickly view it on a map, which is a nice feature. The second query just demonstrates what happens if you do not have a spatial reference identifier. So in this case, this is result 2. If I go to view this data, the data isn't plotted onto a map, it's just plotted onto an empty canvas because it can't accurately position that location onto the map. And then the third example is showing, again, if you have for example, an ST geometry and ST point, the default format for that is extended well-known binary. If you take that and you change it into, say, a text format, then of course it just displays as text here. So, okay, so that is the spatial. The second feature that I wanted to jump into here is around the JSON collections. So I'm going to go to my JSON collections. And the first thing that I would need to do is I need to have some JSON that I want to import into my HANA Cloud database. And one location that I've used to find different data sets is from ArcGIS Hub. And in this particular example, I've got some points of interest for the city of Longview. So if I hover over these different points, they have information about what they are. So this particular example is a golf course. I can see that there's 188 different records. And if I choose to download this data, the data is available in different formats, such as CSV or shapefiles. If I scroll down to the bottom, there is a GeoJSON version of this data. And I've already downloaded that file. And I just wanted to point out that there are a couple of things that you would need to do when you import your JSON into HANA Cloud. So one of the things is that the extension must be a .json file. And there's a requirement that each JSON document should be on its own line. So you might need to make a few tweaks to your JSON file, depends on the format that it originally is before you can import it. I have an Amazon S3 bucket here, and I've already uploaded my version of that JSON file. And now I'm going to go ahead and import it into my database. So I'm going to choose import data. I'm going to pick Amazon S3. And as mentioned, there's now an option here to choose the credential. So do I want to enter my access key and my secret key, or do I want to use the database credential where I've previously stored that information? So I will do that. I'll put in my region, bucket name, and the file path. Proceed to step 3. I'm going to create a new JSON collection, and I'll put it into the schema of hotel. And I will give this a name of points of interest for the city of Longview. And once I say import, I'll get a success or failure message across the top. If I refresh my tree, you can see that I now have the new points of interest, the new JSON collection. So let's take a look at that JSON collection. So I'm going to open up my SQL console, and I will put in a few SQL queries. And I will execute those. So the first one is returns the set of the different documents or JSON collections that have been imported. So I've got 188 of those. And you can see each one is returned as a JSON object. Again, I can use the built-in viewer to visualize what that looks like or help sort of format in a little bit of a nicer manner. I can see that this document has got a properties object, has a couple different fields such as the name, an F code, address, a linked URL, and it also has a GeoJSON representation of the point of interest. So you can see here that it's got a coordinates array with a longitude and a latitude. If I go to the second result, or the second query, instead of returning this as one long JSON document, I can now start breaking that up into different columns, as I'm showing here. You can see that the geometry object is still a JSON document. The third query, let me just make this a little bit bigger. I've now used a method called JSON value. So I'm going into that array and got the first array value and the second array value to get the longitude and the latitude. And then the fourth example, I'm taking this geometry object that was in the GeoJSON format, and I've used a method called stgeom from GeoJSON. So to creating stgeometry field, which is shown here. And with that, I can then visualize that again using the map viewer. Okay, and then the last feature that I wanted to highlight, I'm going to switch now to my data lake relational engine. And I have, again, this new folder here, database diagnostic files. And within here, I can see a list of the different server log files and query plans. I can quickly find one. So I'm just going to change this to look at a large file here. So this is a 9 megabyte file. I can view it within the built-in viewer. And it loads fairly quickly. And the reason for that is it loads the tail end of the file. So it's loaded the last 1,000 lines. I can scroll through the file. When I reach the top of the file, we will load the next 1 megabyte chunk of the file. And of course, if I wanted to view this locally, I could just select the file and choose to download the file. One last feature that I wanted to quickly show here, which is how to enable a query plan in a data lake relational engine and how to quickly view that query plan. Okay, so I've got some SQL here to enable the query plan option for a data lake relational engine. I'm executing a query, which is to sum up or make a grouping of all the different hotel rooms that are of type suite and calculate their average price. I'll execute that query. I go back to my logs folder. If I modify, look for the latest by time, this kind of list is a static list, so I need to refresh this. And here I can see my just generated query plan. Because it's an HTML file, I'm going to choose to download it. And then I can open that up in my browser here. And I can quickly look at this data lake relational engine query plan. So as an example, I can jump to this leaf node. I can see information that this was the condition. So I'll reduce the list to the group of rooms that are type suite. I can see the table row count went from 38 to 8, and I can see some timing information. Okay, so that concludes the demonstration of some recent new features. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Jonathan Bregler.
All right, thank you, Dan. I'm going to share my screen. And so, yeah, thank you. I will be talking a little bit about the Database Explorer Visual Studio Code plugin. Maybe a little bit of background. We have released this Visual Studio Code plugin publicly at the beginning of the year. And so now it's available via the Visual Studio Code Marketplace. So no extra effort, just install it like any other Visual Studio Code extension that you might know. And so the purpose of this tool is basically the same as the Database Explorer, and you can use it either completely local, right, to define your own database connections, or the other mode that you can use it for is you can use it as a sort of companion tool for the HANA Database Explorer in the cloud that Dan has just been demoing, which means you can reuse the database connections that you have defined in the HANA Database Explorer in the cloud. No matter the connection, the features that are available are the same. So right now we have catalog browsing and the SQL console. And so this quarter, we've added a few features that I would like to highlight. The main feature that I hope is useful is that we can now actually open files in the SQL console and also save the content of a SQL console to files. And furthermore, we have added the ability to execute parameterized statements. And we've also made some minor improvements. For example, it's now possible to set the auto commit state of a connection. And we've made it easier to use objects that are shown in the catalog browser and SQL statements by adding the option of copying their names. And finally, we've added the ability to generate create statements to look at the definition of objects. And yeah, that much for the slides. Now I'll show a quick demo of how this works. So here's a plain Visual Studio Code installation. And if you install the Database Explorer extension, you get a new icon here on the left. If you hover over it, you see it's the Database Explorer extension. And so the first thing you notice, there's the list of connections divided into local connections. And as I mentioned, there's also the connections from the Database Explorer in the cloud. And yeah, it's nothing fancy about it. As you can see, you can just look at or open the connections and take a look at the object, right? For example, the tables. And down here, you can now see the tables that you have. Right, and so the other main feature that I mentioned, for each connection, you can open a SQL console, which opens in a new tab, and then you can start using that to, say, execute queries like this. Execute it, and you get the result below here, which you all should be familiar with from Database Explorer or really any other database tool out there. So as I mentioned, what we can do now is, since this quarter is, we can have parameterized queries. So I can enhance these queries, for example, to say, for dummy equals question mark. And so if we execute this, we get this new screen where we can now enter a value for the parameter. All right, and so if I just enter y, then we get nothing because that's actually not a value in the database. But if we add x and run it again, then we get the result, as you might be used to. Right, and as I mentioned, now if I wanted to select something from a complicated table, maybe like this one, before this release, you would have to somehow type the name. What you can do now is you can just say select star from, and then you can, I don't know, just right-click a table down here and just copy the name or the full name, paste it here, and then you already have the name and can run a select from it. I'll quickly also show the create statement functionality, right? So if I don't know, just pick any random table, click here on generate create statement, what'll happen is there will be a new SQL console that's been opened. It'll connect to the database, and it will show you the create statement for that particular object that you've clicked on. All right, and so the other feature that I wanted to show is what I also mentioned, the ability of opening and saving content of the SQL console. Until the previous release, the content of the SQL console was more or less gone if you closed it. And now if you say, well, but I have important queries that I want to remember for later, like these ones here, you can now hit the save button, and you get a save dialog, and you can give it a file name. Save it, and as you can see, the tab name changed to the file, and now your content is saved in this file. Since we're running in an IDE which has a workspace and a file system, what you could also use it for is just opening arbitrary SQL statements. Something like I have a SQL console, and now have downloaded the HANA statement collection, for example, which is a zip file, and if you extract it, it looks like this, right? So a lot of text files with useful SQL statements. And so this is also something that you could use it for. Now you can open a SQL console, click open, and just browse through the files that you're interested in. And just say, I'm interested in the tables, right? And then you open it, and as you can see, now the content of the file has been added to a SQL console. And then you can say, just execute it, and you'll get the result down here. And yeah, so if you then want to make changes and say, I'm only interested in, say, the dpadmin schema, run it, make sure it works, okay. And now you can choose to either save the file, which will overwrite the existing file, or if you say, I want to keep my original file, there's a save as button. And then you can, save it as any file you want, something like tables. And here you go, you have the new file, and yeah. And that is my demo. So back to you, Thomas.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. And let me quickly take over the screen again so that we can also cover a few other innovations. But before I jump into that, thanks also for giving us a demo, especially on the Database Explorer and the Database Explorer plugin. I think both tools are now providing even more functionality. The multi-model capabilities are becoming way more integrated into the Database Explorer, which is great from my perspective. And also the Database Explorer plugin for Visual Studio Code is adding more and more functionality that will definitely make use of the service definitely a lot easier. Now, let's talk about a few additional innovations and general news that I want to share with you, as we have the possibility to do that today. Most importantly, we want to mention that we have a new data center supported with HANA Cloud, basically where we provide HANA Cloud and all of the services. Now, as you know, HANA Cloud is in itself a multi-cloud offering, means we're running HANA Cloud on multiple cloud service providers. Customers can select the service provider of their choice that fits their needs best, that is represented in their locations. But overall, we're striving to provide a very global coverage. So means for each individual cloud service provider, we're trying to have data centers spread all over the globe. And now specifically for Google Cloud Platform, we initially started with data centers in the United States and in Europe. And now since this quarter, we're happy also to announce that HANA Cloud is also available in Asia Pacific, very specifically in India, now also for our customers looking for a Google Cloud Platform deployment. What's important to mention that for now, this deployment is only providing access to the SAP HANA database, but the data lake will be available shortly after. So in a few weeks from now, we will also provide customers to the possibility to use the data lake as part of SAP HANA Cloud in Mumbai, India on Google Cloud Platform. The next topic that I want to talk about isn't necessarily an innovation, but it's the chance or the possibility to co-innovate with SAP, to experience technology that we're already providing and that we're constantly striving to innovate. Within SAP HANA Cloud, you have the possibility to use, let's say, replication technologies, replication tools that we have to offload scenarios from your on-premise systems to HANA Cloud. On the one hand side, to fully benefit from the capabilities that we're offering in HANA Cloud, and also to take away a load maybe from your on-premises solutions and to, let's say, dynamically offload to a way more flexible environment, as HANA Cloud is one of these from my perspective. And now what we've set up is a so-called customer engagement initiative that gives customers the possibility to work very closely with us, with our product experts, but also with the product engineering department, to apply these technologies in their very own environments and to learn about it, to gather experiences about it, and also to share feedback with us. What's part of the project is, of course, that we also offer support in setting it up, in being successful, hopefully in the end with the tool. And therefore, I really want to highlight this initiative specifically. And as you can see on the screen, the registration is open until July 9th. So definitely you should not miss the chance to register if this is a very interesting project and initiative for you. And now, last but not least, I want to quickly show you a few of the resources that we have added to the document and to the presentation slides that you can definitely also download. Here you will find all of the references that we mentioned throughout the webinar being listed. So first of all, our What's New blog that tries to summarize everything that has been shown today, but also gives links to other resources and also to the replays of the webinars. In addition, we do have blog posts in here that go in detail, for instance, into the functionalities that have been added to the Database Explorer or to the Visual Studio Code plugin, or specifically focusing on the innovations in the area of calculation view modeling. So all of them are listed here. And in addition, as I said in the beginning, what we've been presenting today is not the entire product scope that has been shipped with the QRC2 delivery of SAP HANA Cloud. This still holds true. But as we want to give you also the full picture, we have also linked our What's New viewer that gives you the possibility to really dive into all of the details of what has changed and what has been introduced to HANA Cloud. So you will find that link also in here. And that basically, from my perspective, concludes our webinar. I'm happy to thank everyone who joined to our webinar today or listening to what we have introduced in HANA Cloud, specifically our highlight topics as we've been covering them today. I want to thank every one who presented today. Thanks to the product experts that gave us a demo and a tour through all of the innovations. And with that, I want to say goodbye, thank you, and talk to you soon, latest next quarter when we introduce another bunch of great innovations. Thank you.